So good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Protiviti and Robert Half Collaboration Forum. My name is Paul Middleton, and I'm joined here today by my colleagues from Protiviti and our sister company, Robert Half. This is our weekly collaboration forum, and this is our fifth and final series that will take us to the end of English lockdown on June the 21st, we hope. It's great to see some familiar faces here and some new faces alike today. Now, since March of last year, our weekly forum has been aiming to invigorate, challenge and inspire us all to be bold, to look beyond our computer screens and to stand up and think differently, as well as to bring optimism in what has been for so many a time of disruption, uncertainty and often change. Over the months, our forum has become a place for today's business leaders and our leaders of tomorrow to talk to each other, learn from each other, and challenge each other, as well as gain confidence from each other's perspectives and experiences. And that aim is the same today as it's always been. This is your forum. This is not a closed forum. You're not muted, and it's pretty informal. And I urge you all to get involved and make your voice heard. A thread that's run through all of our forums is that now is the time to think differently and to be actioning both big and small ideas. Put differently, we believe at Robert Half and Protiviti that if we don't proactively drive change during this continued period of disruption, we run the risk of rapidly becoming irrelevant and falling behind the pack. But there's another danger now, a danger that's lurking for us all, a tipping point that we are rapidly approaching as we begin to unlock, spend more time face-to-face with our colleagues and move out of our home offices. And that danger is that we sleepwalk back into our old working habits and we leave behind our COVID mindsets, a mindset that has given us a newfound ability to drive change at a rate we previously thought impossible, to achieve things that we were told we could not be done, and to suddenly be able to overcome barriers that had previously seemed unscalable. In other words, over the last 13 months, we've successfully broken an office-based 9-to-5 working pattern that's been with us for centuries. And our challenge to you all in this forum is not to march backwards and fall into our old habits, losing everything we've achieved so far. Because if we do, we can be sure that others won't and will be falling behind. Instead, we're encouraging you to be bold and imagine what the future can be and how we can grasp it. And that's exactly what we've been doing over these few weeks and we'll keep on doing in this forum. We've already looked at the future of culture, the future of healthcare, the future of social justice and inclusion, and the future of success. And in the coming weeks, we'll be looking at the future of work, the future of technology, the future of retail, the future of the office, and many more topics, and digging into how you can shape that future and build on what we've achieved and not sleepwalk back into the past. Today, we're looking at the future of sustainability and ESG, and whether these are concepts that should now be a business imperative for us all, or on the other hand, given everything we've been through, they can still be treated as a nice to have. After all, we've been through a lot in the last year, and many businesses have needed to prioritise survivability over sustainability. However, the pandemic has amplified ESG awareness and expectations for so many people. Investors, shareholders, clients, employees, prospective employees, media and politicians alike are all demanding ESG authenticity and action from UK PLC. So what is your company doing today? What do you need to do tomorrow? What have we learned from the last 14 months that we should take forward? Do you really still need to have the same business carbon footprint you had 14 months ago? Are you being sufficiently bold and innovative in your ESG strategy? Should we all be demanding a faster pace of change, given everything we've achieved in the last year? How can you help shift your company from a veneer of ESG to becoming a leader? And ultimately, what's the risk to your company fortunes if you don't? Like most weeks, we've tried to take on the big topics and the big topics like ESG that are important to you. And the first thing I'll say this week is we're not going to be covering every aspect of sustainability and ESG in 1 hour. It's a huge topic. So we're going to be taking some bite-sized chunks, but go in the directions that you, our attendees, take us. And to help us do that, we have 4 fantastic sustainability and ESG gurus to help facilitate our debate for the next hour, and I'd like to introduce them to you. First, I'm delighted to introduce Andy Boteler, who is Director of Finance at Riverford Organic Farmers. Riverford is an organic farm and UK-wide organic vegetable box delivery company, and they are the largest organic fresh food retailer in the UK. As you'll hear from Andy, sustainability and an ESG ethos is at the heart of everything they do at Riverford. Andy joined Riverford in 2019 as Director of Finance, having previously been CFO at Gooch and Housego for 12 years and FD at Cyfam Fibre Optics. He's also a non-exec director at Octopus AIM Venture Capital Trust, and delighted he can join us today. Next, I'd like to introduce Steph Wall, who is the ESG Director at Palatine Private Equity. Palatine is a private equity company with a focus on investing in UK businesses, typically investing between 10 and 30 million pounds of equity in each investment. At Palatine, Steph delivers ESG leadership throughout the investment lifecycle, engaging with management teams to assess and manage ESG risks and value creation opportunities, as well as implementing Palatine's award-winning ESG framework that she'll talk more about later. Steph is passionate about sustainability and investing to create a more balanced, greener, cleaner and successful society, and joined Palatine in 2019, having previously worked as an environmental consultant at WSP, and delighted she can join us today. Next, I'd like to introduce Tim Stedman, who is CEO at Agilix. Tim joined Agilix as CEO in 2020, before which he was Senior Vice President for Strategy and Corporate Development at Trinseo, as well as serving as Senior Vice President for the plastics and feedstocks businesses there. Before Trinseo, Tim spent over 20 years at ExxonMobil, where, with his last role being as Business Director for ExxonMobil's their basic chemical business. He now leads Agilix with the mission of turning plastic waste into value through applying advanced recycling technology to give plastic a new circular life, accelerating and facilitating a shift to a low carbon economy. And again, delighted Tim can join us today. And next, I'd like to introduce Kai Bangabola, who is founder of Total Eco Management. Kai has been an executive and non-executive director for large and small organisations for 30 years, and he's a recognised expert in sustainability, its reporting and governance. To respond to the climate crisis and recognising the need for sustainable global economies where we can all thrive, Kai created Total Eco Management, an award-winning sustainability consultancy that works in all sectors and who are the official corporate sustainability reporting consultants to the London 2012 Sustainable Olympic Games. Kai writes articles to various publications and speaks nationally and internationally on sustainability, measurement, impacts, climate change, and how to embed cultures and systematic approaches for long-term business resilience. He's also a sustainability ambassador to the Chartered Institute of Building. So Kai completes our lineup of panelists for today, and obviously you're in good hands from an ESG perspective, but we're delighted that all of them can join us. So Andy, if I may come to you first of all, Riverford is a company where sustainability and ESG have been at the very core of your operating model and your ethos from day one. Can you tell us why you think sustainability and ESG are imperatives for any business, please?
I think I can certainly give you an idea of how it works for us and why we think it's important, and then maybe we can see how that can work for other businesses. So first of all, interestingly, ESG is not really a term we use within the business. It's kind of embedded in what we do. So Riverford is an employee-owned ethical business, and we run our business. It's going to sound quite kind of corporate, but on 4 principles. We have to be commercially successful. I think, without the competence to actually make us a successful, sustainable business, our values are nothing. So that's the first one, commercially successful. We are a co-owner business, so we have to be an outstanding place to work. We also are basically live by our brand, so our organic veg is everything we do. And finally, we want to be a force for good in the business, basically our planet. And those 4 principles have equal weight in our business, in everything we do. In our decision making, they will be basically everything we can consider. So if we are making an investment decision, all those 4 criteria will be looked at. And I think that means we make better decisions because of that. And also, it creates like a kind of a virtual circle. So one feeds the other, and we find that that is good for us. It's good for the business. And I think kind of finally, this is a great place to be commercially at the moment. I think kind of being an ethical business is resonating brilliantly with our customers at the moment. So that's kind of probably kind of why I think it's a great place to be and a great thing to do at the moment.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm sure we'll dig into those more, but those 4 principles I think will resonate with a lot of people here. Tim, if I could just turn to you for some opening comments. Angelic applies advanced technology to expand recycling, allowing for far greater plastic reuse and circularity, and accelerating, hopefully, a shift not just for you, but for your clients, suppliers and supply chain to a low carbon economy. What changes have you seen since the start of the pandemic in terms of the priority that the businesses around you, as well as Agilex yourselves, are putting on sustainability? Oh, you're on mute, Tim. Sorry, Tim, you're still on mute. Let me see if I can unmute you, Tim. Tim, any job? We still can't hear you. Tim, might be. I'll come back to you in a minute, Tim, if I may. I don't know if you can't unmute, it may just be worth redialing in, and we'll see if because we could certainly hear you before. But Steph, maybe if I could just turn to you. You're a partner you partner with the leaders of Palatine's portfolio companies to ensure that both their words and their deeds will meet the ESG expectations of tomorrow's marketplace. What are the? I mean, we've heard from Andy there that he's got his 4 principles for Riverford, but what are the key criteria, the frameworks that you use to assess and monitor the ESG risks and performance of those companies?
Yeah, great. So at Palatine, as you said in the intro, we've got an award-winning, robust ESG program that we've had in place for over 10 years now. And I think, something that Andy mentioned was around, making better decisions. And I think our framework really helps us to make those, good investment decisions. So within our ESG program, we have a 6-pillar framework that we apply consistently across our buyout fund and our impact fund, which is reserved for environmentally and socially beneficial companies. And we apply this throughout the investment life cycle, so from pre-deal right through to exit. And I'd say that so the 6-pillar framework has 2 environmental pillars, a supply chain pillar, which we say bridges the environmental and the social aspects. We have 2 social pillars, so focused on people, communities, and the customers that our investments will serve. And then finally, a governance and business ethics pillar that kind of underpins everything that the business does. And I'd say that so throughout the investment life cycle, we use this framework to assess all of our investments and monitor progress against those different areas through annual reporting, and that's both kind of quantitative and qualitative data. And I think we're doing really exciting things with the quantitative data at the moment, because it's one of those areas, is ESG, where there's a wealth of research saying that it contributes to greater financial performance, but it's really hard to pin down how it actually does impact that. Whether if you're talking about a diverse board, for example, it drives innovation. There's again research showing that there's financial performance to having a diverse board, but it's really hard to put that monetary figure on it. So we're doing some exciting stuff at the moment to try and assess that correlation. But for us, management buy-in is really critical. I think when we're having those conversations really on in the deal process, and we'll introduce the companies to our ESG program, we need to ensure that ultimately they're the ones going to be implementing this and driving this within their business. We need to ensure that they are as passionate about it as we are and understand that it's no longer a nice to have. It is, it's a business imperative. It drives that financial performance, and like Andy said, it's a really great place to be commercially at the moment.
Thank you, Steph. And obviously with that, transparency, comparability, and their ability to report and demonstrate that is so important. And Kai, that's your world. You've authored many books and reports on ESG, Kai, and the practical steps that businesses can take to make a difference to their carbon footprint, but also their approach to ESG. Why do you see, Kai, can you tell us a little bit about that, and why you see ESG reporting and transparency is so critical for the future successes of UK businesses, please?
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
We can, Kai.
I'd like to thank both Paul and Layla for inviting me to this forum to discuss environmental social governance as well as sustainability, which are interchangeable. And I'm really pleased about being in such illustrious company also. As they say on LBC Radio, and as you said earlier, Paul, if they build it, they will come. ESG reporting is about organisations evidencing their contributions towards sustainable global economies that protect our planet, our home, with all of its splendour and beauty, as David Attenborough attests, as Stephanie was saying, all these social aspects. Sustainable global economies focus on protecting scarce resources, preventing poverty, and also being transparent. Now, the intersection of criticality to UK business and global business is numerous, and I'll just give you some examples. So one, in no particular order, see, if we have no planet, then we have no people or very few. So we must protect that planet. And if there's very few people and we haven't protected the planet, then of course we have no economy as we know it. So that's critical. Investors, as you heard again from Stephanie, have shifted their sights to support sustainable organisations. Growing laws and legislation are mandating ESG reporting. So, for example, the Companies Act, as amended in 2013, requires a directors and strategic report on gender, greenhouse gases, and human rights issues. There's also laws in the US, Dodd-Frank, and this levies multi-million-pound fines for failure to comply with the law. And a third of the fine is paid to the person that whistle blew on the non-compliance. Bear in mind, people, that the fines are in the hundreds of millions. So that's really big incentive to organisations to comply. And we also have the EU non-financial reporting directives. My fourth point is that there are 46 stock exchanges around the world that will not list companies without a sustainability report. Fifth, stakeholders, from suppliers to regulators, standards bodies to the public, are demanding change, as you've already heard. And if this were not enough, 100% of the G250 report, these are the top 250 organisations in the world, and many of them screen their supply chain for ESG performance. Procurement contracts increasingly require ESG data, as we did in the Olympic Games over a decade ago. So failures in leadership to comply is to be left behind and fail. And that feels pretty critical to me. The truth is, companies are already being left behind, just as many did when the 1774 Industrial Revolution began. This new industrial revolution that we're embarking upon marks the biggest investment opportunity in history. Systemic change in every sector is already afoot, from space travel to coffee. But be very, very clear. Organisations are changing through reporting to focus on broader societal expectations, as referred to in the UN 2013-2030 agenda. Many of you will know this as the Sustainable Development Goals, the aim of which is to deliver prosperity for all on the planet, with the pledge of leaving no one behind. So on that score, coronavirus has been very revealing, and I'll leave it there.
No, thank you, Kai. So I'll pick up on that and play devil's advocate a bit then, because as you say, with that focus on broader societal expectation, as we look to the future now, and in a world where that survivability has been so difficult for many companies over the last 14 months, is it acceptable? And maybe I'll come back to you, Andy, on this to begin with. But is it acceptable that sustainability and ESG objectives might still seem for many a nice to have rather than an imperative, and maybe put some of those societal expectations to one side for the time being? Is it okay not to prioritise ESG?
I think it's not okay from at many levels that we've already just described, kind of from the perspective of our planet as a starting point, but also it's probably not okay from a business perspective either, in that we've already established, both Stephanie and Kai have kind of have mentioned it, in that this is a really good place to be at the moment if you want to be a successful business, not just from a complying with the new regulations that are coming in, which we have to, but actually we're finding that our customers are demanding this this approach, and it's not just our customers. I think we're seeing it more broadly in business, that that kind of lots of companies are actually moving in this direction. I think the main sponsor of COP26 is actually NatWest this year. So this is something. This is a kind of I've been in business a long time, as you can probably see. This is a trend that's kind of moving in this direction. So it's not really a case of can we should we do it? Can we afford to do it? It's a sensible thing to do from a business perspective. I think your business is probably going to be better if you move in this direction. In fact, I think one of the challenges that we have as an ethical business that's been doing this for the last 36 years is that we've got to make sure that there's clear blue water between us and the rest. Our brand is built around kind of maintaining that kind of ethical leadership, and the challenge we have is making sure we're still pushing that boundary, because everyone else is starting to move in this direction as well. Thank you, Andy.
Now, Tim, it's good to have you back. I mean, we've heard from Andy, from Steph, and from Kai that ESG and sustainability is a good place to be. I think you'll agree with that, because obviously from your focus on plastic circularity and reuse and accelerating that shift to the low carbon economy, that's your world. But tell us, how has that world accelerated in the last year or so? Do you see this becoming a greater priority for businesses, and agreeing with Andy that more and more companies wish to be here?
Yeah, I mean, I compare the specific area that we're in, which is this whole area of addressing this issue of plastic waste. I kind of link it sometimes with climate change directly, in that you still today, for most of us, it seems incredible, have people who deny climate change. But you try and find a single person on this planet who denies the issue of plastic waste. It's everywhere. Everyone knows about it. It's in front of us. And what's fascinating is the way that over the past few years there's been this coalescence between regulators, governments, various parts of the industry, NGOs, to really say we've got to do something about it. The challenge, of course, is what are you going to do about it? It's an easy problem to state. It's a difficult problem to solve. But what I've seen with this is that there has been this sort of general and significant shift towards addressing, getting serious about dealing with this issue. And actually, what's happened over the past year and a bit with COVID is effectively nothing other than a continued acceleration. There's been a few bumps in the road, people who were driving towards sustainable aviation fuel. They haven't needed as much aviation fuel in the past year and a half, so things may have slowed down there a little bit. But if you just look at the general trend, the pressure that is on to address this issue, I mean, I'm sure many of you saw the report on the BBC and in the Financial Times, the Guardian earlier this week about who are the big producers of plastic that's then being wasted. You can't hide anymore. And so I think there is this general move, general sentiment, and frankly, things like the COVID situation, it really hasn't caused a sort of missed beat, if you like. I mean, the bizarre thing, the question actually had is, what's changed for you since the start of the pandemic? Well, I wasn't doing this job at the start of the pandemic. So, it's also an interesting thing about the fact that you can do this. You can recruit lots of people. You can build a business in a virtual space, even if that business is dealing with tangible assets. So it's quite exciting. It's a little bit scary sometimes, but, the direction of travel is clear.
Absolutely, Tim, and thank you for that. And just then linking that to a question that Rupert's asked in the chat, and maybe Steph, if I can come to you with this, as we look towards the future, then if we all do agree that, or not necessarily agree, but we're all saying, look, it is an imperative, it is good business. Rupert's asking really, what are the simple steps that business leaders can do? What are the best things that we can do to keep ESG sustainability alive, to help people understand what they're doing, and the easiest steps that people can make to give sustainable outcomes that, as Kai's saying, need to be reported and demonstrated?
I think you made a really good point in the intro, Paul, is that ESG or sustainability is so far-reaching that I think it overwhelms people, and I think that's kind of the biggest mistake you could make is not doing anything for fear of failing. So I think really digging down into what's material in your business, do a bit of a screening exercise of what do your stakeholders want, and by stakeholders consider everything from employees existing and potential, investors potentially, your customers and other partners and suppliers, and really think about what matters to them and identify the opportunities. And I think this is something that we're seeing massively as well, is that switch in mindset from risk management to value creation and opportunities focused as well. And I think we're all in agreement in that it is a real commercial opportunity at the moment. So I think really considering what matters most to your stakeholders, and then think about the opportunities that presents, and having, as dull as it might sound, a robust kind of structured framework or strategy around that links well into your business strategy. I think this shouldn't sit on the side of someone's desk. It needs to be integrated into the business growth plans, integrated into the strategic leadership plans, and really focus as well on what the outcomes need to be. And rather than the intentionality, it's great having policies in place, but really, what are the outcomes that you're trying to achieve, and what are the outcomes that you have achieved, and how can we communicate that effectively and demonstrate the great things that we're doing? Because I think I think some people sometimes think, if you watch Cowspiracy, Seaspiracy, or whatever, you're like, I'm not going to make a difference myself personally. But I think if everyone has that mindset, then we're not going to make a difference. So I think starting small, you definitely should do. But I think if you can educate people along the way and share your story, share your learnings, and then that will encourage people also to make those small changes, but will have a big impact.
Thank you, Steph. And I mean, that what you just said there, I think, reflects a little bit on what Kai was saying earlier about how the different stock exchanges of the world demand that sustainability reporting. But Kai, from your perspective, where do you see the biggest opportunity for these companies to embrace and lead in the ESG and sustainability space? Because there's not only that mandatory reporting, but there's also increased voluntary reporting as well. And where do you see some of the leaders highlighting what they are doing in this space?
Well, essentially on the point that was being made in the question, this is This is what we do. We enable organisations to demystify reporting, because I understand that it is not only a complex piece, but it's actually very dynamic. And we enable organisations to have practical processes. And you would have heard that there's lots of non-financial reporting tools and regulations across the world. And many people are asking, including within the recruitment sphere, what are the areas that I need to understand in order to be of greater benefit to my organization? And leaders of those organizations and directors of those organizations are understanding that there's some 2.4 trillion per annum that is being directed towards organizations that can enter a green stream. And these are organizations that are contributing to the 1.5 degree change. So that makes a massive opportunity for many organizations. Our directors are realizing that what you can't measure, you cannot manage. What you cannot manage, you cannot change. And so as a consequence, our leaders of our organizations really do understand things that have been said. You can't leave these areas, otherwise you will rapidly get left behind. And in fact, when you look at the monetization of companies like Marks and Spencer's that Sir Stuart Rose identified made 50 million a year through their sustainability and their Plan A objectives, it's quite understandable that more and more companies are monetizing their performance. 70% under KPMG's surveys of 5,000 businesses across the world, 70% of those businesses find financial benefit. So hopefully that gives some clarity that it's certainly the way forward.
No, thank you for that, Kai. Tim, if I may come to you, because John's asked a question that I guess is at the heart of a lot of this. And if I paraphrase the question or the point that he's making is he's saying that, we as a society are consuming so much, and that the plastic waste is going to destroy us all. In John's words, can you give us your view on that? Because I think from what you've been doing at Agilix, this is an example of where you've been applying innovation to try and remedy some of this, and and to really think differently and to see how we can make a difference without I guess kind of undermining all of our societal norms, but seeing how we can live with that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a complex area, and because I think there is always a danger of through the desire to do good actually ending up doing more harm. And whether that's from the perspective of climate change or whether it's from the perspective of health, it's also a danger of applying, our environment in the developed world and saying that actually that can apply to the developing world as well. So, this is an incredibly complex area. I think the key thing for me, though, if you start with it at just the sheer illogical nature of what we're doing is from a human perspective at the moment, we're going around the world and we are drilling underneath the planet's surface largely for hydrocarbons that we are then either burning, or we are turning into plastic and then burning, or we're still maybe throwing into the oceans. And then we're drilling up more. And so that cycle just goes on and on. It's nuts. And this fundamental principle of what we're trying to do is to say that actually those hydrocarbons, that fundamental resource, it can add huge value to society. I mean, most of you on this call, I suspect, have had your first or second COVID jab. If it wasn't for single-use plastic, you wouldn't have had it. So, just throwing out single-use plastic as something that we should never use kind of doesn't make sense. What we have to do, though, is be honest with ourselves about what is the right way of using those precious molecules, because those molecules are things that can be used and used and used again if we do it correctly. And so our approach is to say today, 90% of the world's plastic that's being produced is quote unquote leaked. What that means, it's not going into proper waste systems. Some of it will be going into the ocean. Some of it will just be littered. Very, very little is recycled. And what we want to do is basically jealously guard those molecules. We want to be able to recover them, and we want to be able to use them in a way that is far better than producing virgin material, but actually ends up with the same end use quality as virgin material. So you can use those molecules to support the things that are really driving human quality of life and supporting climate change. You know, if you look at things like the electrification of vehicles, it's important that the right materials are used in that. That is a high quality use of those molecules. One of my bugbears, you know, at the other end of the spectrum is those single-use kind of bottles of shampoo or whatever that you get in a hotel. That's a terrible idea for a use of those molecules. You know, use them once, throw them away. So we've got to address the waste system. We've got to challenge ourselves to really think about those fundamental hydrocarbon molecules as something that are of substantial value that we can use for our life. And what we do is bring the technology to actually address that and to make that possible. And we're actually doing it. We're doing it on the west coast of the US at the moment, and then we're rolling it out to other players. But it's something that's very exciting, but I mean, it's just a huge challenge that we have to address as a society.
Absolutely. So look, everyone here, you've heard from our four distinguished panelists here about how they think that ESG and sustainability is an imperative. But I'd like to see what you think. And if you're familiar with our format, you know that we've done this before through an online poll. If you look at a link in the chat that should be appearing imminently, you'll see that takes you to a Menti poll. There you go. Kathy's just posted it there. If you click on that link, you'll find one simple question that says, that asks you whether you believe your company's strategy and approach to ESG is fundamental to its future success. You can't sit on the fence with this. You've got to agree or disagree. It will take you 10 seconds. It's anonymous, but please do let us know, and we'll come back to that very shortly. In the meantime, just while you're doing that, I would just like to introduce Katrina from Protiviti, Katrina Nardiello, who leads our green initiatives in Protiviti UK, and is just going to share some perspectives on how Protiviti and Robert Half are approaching ESG and some of the challenges we're seeing at our own clients. So just a quick perspective on that, please, Katrina.
Thanks, Paul, and hi everyone, good morning. As Paul mentioned, I'm Katrina Nardiello and I'm the founder and the lead of Protiviti UK's Green Team. Protiviti cares about the environment. We have a passionate team of people who collate ideas and drive action throughout our organisation, building awareness and sparking thought for change in people's personal lives throughout the office. We have made numerous changes in the last 3 years and more, including strategic planning for our future. Our green team has been established for over 2 years now, and we have a green contact in every single one of our countries worldwide. We won a Lotus Award last year for our recognition in our internal sustainability initiatives. Moving our offices to the Shard fits with our values on sustainability, as this is a zero to landfill building. One example to encourage our employees to have less waste is our distribution of reusable coffee cups. We distributed these to every UK employee. We have also ran numerous educational events throughout our offices, including a really well attended book club. We had a few guest speakers, so we've had Greenpeace talk, and we also had a Brewdog event that was really well attended and really interesting. But for us, there are so many future opportunities that we're working on, and the Green Team are really proud to be currently mapping out our path to carbon neutral. We're excited to have connected with so many of our clients and sharing our internal ideas and supporting our clients and our sustainability network with their personal green initiatives. So we've had some really interesting speakers this morning. It's been really great to hear everyone's insights on what's going on and the different network that that we're seeing and the changes that people are making. So we're seeing numerous changes in supply chain, travel, shift in investments, but is that enough? Everyone has heard of planting trees to offset the carbon, but ESG is far more than that. We need to be transparent. We need to think about reducing our environmental impact, exactly what we are doing, not just offsetting this by planting trees. We all have a responsibility to understand our business processes from an environmental point of view. And to Steph's point earlier, it doesn't matter if you're one person trying to be imperfectly environmentally friendly. It's a lot better than one person. It's better to have millions of people trying to be imperfectly environmentally friendly than one person trying to be zero waste. So that's one key message that we can take from today, that we all have that responsibility. And for us at Protiviti and Robert Half, sustainability is not just about ticking a box. We are passionate about reducing our footprint and sharing and learning from our network. So thanks everyone for having me on today and sharing your story.
Thank you, Katrina. Thank you very much for that. Would my team just like to show the results of the poll, please? Which I think you'll see is just showing that most of you agree. Over half of you agree that something. You don't strongly agree with it, but we're moving in the right direction. Now, as Katrina was saying, I mean, people are at the heart of this, and there is a shared responsibility. And so, Andy, if I may just come back to you on this, do you think that companies should also extend those ESG and sustainability standards to their own people if they truly want to be authentic? You know, so to what extent should we have those ESG objectives written into hiring criteria, performance objectives, rewards?
I think it's really interesting. I think kind of you're starting to cross over into those kind of areas of, you know, personal freedoms.
Yeah.
So for us, if you like, as an employee-owned business and as an ethical business, we find that there is a kind of a natural leaning towards the things we're talking about today. So kind of our co-owners are very keen to support environmental initiatives. They're very keen to kind of to promote the kind of the ESG ideals. But even for us, I think kind of, you know, we're having a debate at the moment about our pension plan, for example. You know,
yeah.
we currently have a kind of a quite a standard kind of employers pension scheme at the moment, but should that be an ethical scheme? And that's a debate that we're actually having. Should we be, as an ethical business, should we be insisting that our pension plan follows those principles? We don't know the answer to that yet, but it's a debate we're having internally. I think we're going to put that to the co-owners and see how they think. So I imagine there would be a kind of a vote around that, and we'll go from there. Maybe a choice. But in terms of should we force those ideals on people as an ethical business? Probably not. I think it comes down to choice. I would rather people be making those choices for the right reasons than being forced to be making those choices. So no, not from an employee or co-owner perspective. We leave it to them to make those choices.
Okay, thank you for that. I mean, just building on that as well, just a reflection on that poll. Although 53% I think agreed, a sizable amount actually didn't agree that ESG is an imperative. So 18% actually said they actually strongly disagree that ESG is fundamental to the future success of their company. Steph, what are your thoughts on that? Is that what do we need to do to? I mean, is that fine? Do we need to try and shift that? Does that come back to the people question that Andy was saying? What do we need to do with that?
Yeah, interesting one. I think it's a difficult one to answer, but I think, you know, if I kind of echo Kai's point that he made right at the beginning, was around, you know, this, if we don't have a future planet, you know, people don't exist on the planet, then business and, you know, the economy doesn't exist. So for me personally, and I get that I'm quite biased in this because I'm really passionate about it, but for me, it is a fundamental. And I think more and more we're seeing, the commercial benefits associated with sustainability and integrating that into, business strategy and growth plans. I think it would be a business risk to not kind of embrace that and implement, some form of strategy within your business, given that employees are asking for it, or potential employees, especially if you think about the change in demographics. So millennials and Gen Z want to work for companies that align with their values and with their ethics. So, are you going to, miss the best talent? Are you going to struggle to attract and retain the best talent? And I think from an investment perspective, similar to what Andy was saying, as people look to invest, whether it's their pensions or whatever, once you've got that kind of change in wealth that millennials, Gen Zs are investing, I think they'll want to invest in an impact investment scheme or something that's ethical. And I personally think it's a massive opportunity at the moment, and I think it would be a business risk to completely ignore that opportunity.
Thank you, Steph. I mean, Kai, just on that, do you think that regulation is going to be forcing people's hands here? So do you think there'll be more regulation coming and a need for more ESG sustainability regulation reporting and oversight that might shift people's thinking, who are currently in that 18%, they strongly disagree with the ESG and sustainability as being fundamental to their future success?
Initially, it was always about having reporting that was voluntary and not mandated. Increasingly, there is a definite direction towards mandated, and that comes from the need to meet the climate crisis that many governments have already identified in law that we must address. International laws from COP, and we've got COP26 in Glasgow, are increasingly encouraging organisations to enter into this change. So I think it's a reality that some people won't follow through. The writing is on the wall. If people choose not to read it, that is a matter for them. But we are certainly moving into a direction where things are becoming part of a lexicon that's easier. Youngsters are choosing to go to companies that have sustainability credentials. Children, including my own, are formulating green teams in schools. So we only need to look at our universities and places of education to understand what the future is looking like. So let's just keep on encouraging people to move towards a better future for us all.
Thank you, Kai. So to move towards that better future, we need technology, we need innovation. And Tim, from your perspective, we've seen a lot of that in the last year. We've seen a lot of huge advancements in technology. Vaccines coming to market in 12 months, normally take years. Where do you see, where and how can we best apply technology and innovation to make the biggest difference and challenge some of the existing norms? So, and one of those existing norms, I think, is kind of highlighted in the chat here by someone highlights. I think Steve highlighting, the reduction in business travel. How do we look at something like that and see other ways to reduce our carbon footprint as we go back to the office?
Yeah, actually, it's a discussion that's a very live one at the moment in our company. Majority of people that work for me work in the US. The US has effectively reopened, and people can travel very freely. You're not having to wear masks if you're vaccinated, so it's kind of business as usual. And one of the things that we're wanting to be very active on is saying, let's just not let the handbrake off and suddenly everybody's running around like headless chickens again. Because actually, what we've managed to do in the past year is continue to grow, continue to develop projects, continue to develop business without traveling around like lunatics, without burning lots of time as well as lots of fuel and doing the damage associated with that. So I think it's there isn't a simple answer, but there is an approach of saying let's make sure that the technology gains that have clearly been demonstrated in the past year are now locked in. And there's clearly need for physical interaction and for those things to happen, but be very mindful and deliberate about where those occur. And I think it comes back, there was another question in the chat about not using so much stuff, if you like. And it's like, I think absolutely, I think that's part of it as well, that we need to be honest with ourselves. That's probably the single biggest thing that we can do individually to impact on this whole area, whether it's climate change or whether it's the plastics kind of crisis, is stop using so much. There are parts of the world that actually that's very difficult to say to. Try saying that to people in the developing world, well, you shouldn't consume as much when they're consuming so little today. But frankly, in the Western world, we have plenty of scope for reducing our footprint from a usage perspective, and that goes for travel and many other things.
And thank you, Tim. And in many companies, I mean, that's got to come from the top. That's got to be, the tone from the top has got to support that and drive that through culture, behaviours, and everything that comes from that. And maybe, coming to yourself, Steph and Andy, just for your perspectives on this, maybe starting with you, Steph, do you see that boardroom mindsets have changed enough yet? And where do you see the biggest resistance to ESG and sustainability imperatives?
I'd say definitely mindsets have changed, and something that I alluded to before was around that switch from being risk focused to opportunity focused and seeing the value in this. I think where people might resist is where they think that they've not got a significant environmental footprint personally. So if you're kind of a business services office-based company, but it's one of those things, isn't it? Kind of everything comes out the woodwork when you talk about environmental impact. But the impact of data centers and cloud hosting systems now, there's a massive carbon footprint associated with that. Whereas historically, I think people didn't see that and therefore don't perceive that their impact is significant. So I think it's just that education piece again, making sure people are aware of the impact that they're having, how we can minimize that, but also the opportunities it brings, and just kind of going back to the technology and innovation point. And I think it was in the chat earlier around, is it bad for business that we're asking people to consume less? But I think if you look at Patagonia, which are like my biggest inspiration as a company, their model is buy less. And kind of every time, and that comes from leadership as well, that's kind of why the company was established. They've got the environment at the heart of the business. But I think, their growth in terms of revenue and profit has skyrocketed and continues to do so every time they kind of reinforce their message around consuming less, buying better, but buying less. And we had a really good example within our portfolio as well around increasing their efficiency in terms of the technology that this company produces, to then enable them to access new markets in developing countries where there's less access to water and a requirement to minimize energy efficiency. So I think it presents a big opportunity.
No, thank you, Steph. And Andy, just some quick thoughts from you before we sum up, but to take on another big subject very quickly, but to what extent do you at Riverford extend your boardroom or your your gaze to your supply chain as well. So to what extent do you expect your suppliers to be following the same ethical standards that you are?
I think kind of if we go back to those 4 principles,
Yeah.
and that can be applied to how we deal with our suppliers as well. So from our perspective, our suppliers are key. In fact, when we became an employee-owned business kind of 3 or 4 years ago, there was a debate whether that kind of ownership should be shared with our suppliers, because they are absolutely key. So, fundamentally, we have a fair deal with them. We give them a good price. We pay them on time. But for us, it goes a bit deeper than that. And if we take, for example, our carbon reduction plans, we feel that it's not just our carbon that we should be looking to reduce. It should be our supply chain's carbon as well. We count that as part of our carbon, and our plans are about how we can help them to reduce their carbon. It's a concept that kind of Stephanie's probably kind of aware of, because it's something that Patagonia have kind of signed up to as well. So for us, the supply chain is key. We also think, as I mentioned right at the start, this virtuous circle. By engaging with our supply chain, and our supply chain is primarily kind of small to medium-sized growers, we can help them. We can bring them forward. We give them a fair deal. But also, that's a great story. That kind of reinforces the authenticity of our brand and makes our business better from a commercial perspective. It's that kind of getting that kind of virtual circle of those 4 principles working in practice.
Absolutely, Andy. Thank you so much for that. Another huge topic that we're not going to fully unpack here, but you talked to it so eloquently. So thank you. I'd like just to quickly go back to all of our panelists today, and just, you work in this space, you see so much happening here. What would be the one thing you'd like everyone here in this forum to take away from today's forum that will empower them to make a difference from an ESG and sustainability perspective in their company? Kai, if I could just start with you, please.
Salus populi suprema lex esto. And this is about understanding that people are supreme. We need to preserve the planet for people. And it's all about learning as well, so people understand more and more about issues of sustainability. And then when we look at those issues of consumption, it's very important to understand that's changing. So valorization is happening where we recycle materials. In this country, 615 million tons and barely 100 million tons is recycled. So there's a lot more that we can do, and removing built-in obsolescence, and that's really directed at that question of consumption. The big thing for people to understand is that sustainability is not is completely compatible. There's no conflict between making profit and organizational growth. We just have to find and do it better, perform better, set goals and targets into the future for all of our organizations. And exactly as Andy said, organizations are supporting their supply chains to do the same. And this has been going on for nearly a decade now. So
thank you.
That's the way forward.
Kai, thank you ever so much. I hope the rest of you have suitably good Latin quotes as well, but that's fantastic, Kai. Thank you ever so much. Steph, quick closing thoughts from you, please.
Yeah, mine's going to be really dull now. I think just kind of going back to the point I made earlier is make a start somewhere, and don't be afraid to, make small changes. I think, we just need to, everyone kind of needs to make a minor change, whether that's, 1 meat-free day a week or whatever it might be, and to educate people as well, share and communicate with others. Thank
you, Steph. Tim?
Yeah, I don't do Latin, I'm afraid, but I think the thing that I would say, which does build on that, is that there is no silver bullet here. It's not a case of I can wave a magic wand, this all gets done. It's about taking steps. I often talk to my team about the fact that it's about and, not or. You know, there isn't a single solution, and people who are prejudging solutions early on, I think, are potentially doing as much damage as those who are just saying that these issues don't exist. Because, you know, the problem is so big, we've got to get going, we've got to try as many different solutions as possible, and over time the set of solutions that really will make a difference will come to the top. You know, it'll rise to the top, but we just got to get going. I think that's the key thing.
Thank you, Tim. Andy, closing point from you?
So putting aside it's just the right thing to do, we should remember that kind of running a commercially successful business and running a business that has ESG as its heart are not mutually exclusive. In fact, in the future, in fact now, if you don't follow those principles, you're probably going to be harming your business rather than protecting it.
Absolutely. Andy, thank you ever so much. We've run out of time. We're slightly over. I'm going to get told off. But look, thank you ever so much, everyone. If you like what you've heard, please feel free to contact us and continue the discussion, and contact each other as well. There's been some fantastic thoughts in the chat. Please feel free to connect with each other or come through us, and we'll happily make that happen. I'm sorry if I didn't get to your question, but hopefully we got to the spirit of each of your questions as they came through. There'll be a video of our forum posted on our website, so please feel free to share that with your colleagues, your friends, your LinkedIn contacts. But look, I'd just like to say a big thank you to Tim, to Andy, to Steph, to Kai, and also to Katrina. Thank you all so much for your perspectives. It's fascinating to hear on such an important fundamental topic that we'll keep talking about, I think. Next week, we're looking at another huge, massive topic, the future of technology. So until then, on behalf of my Protiviti and Robert Half team, I'd just like to extend our best wishes to you all. Stay safe, be bold, be kind to each other, and we look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you ever so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.